Hello and welcome to the recorded version of our Spring 2018 Grant Seeker webinar. You see here on this slide the names of the folks who presented our live version of this webinar. They are not all with me right now, but my name is Ann Phillips. I am the Foundation's Director of Grant Making, and I'll be presenting today's content. This is the agenda for the rest of our time together, and this presentation will last about 30 minutes. First, I want to clarify that the focus of this webinar is our Community Grants program. We have a few other grants programs here, like the Tillotson program or the Wellborn program. There are some others, but this webinar focuses only on our Community Grants program. So I'll begin by summarizing for you the changes we have made to the program for this year. For those of you who attended one of our live workshops last fall, this will be a bit of a repeat, but we wanted to get everyone on the same page about these program details before moving forward. Then I'll launch into what is the meat of today's presentation and what we really wanted to share with you, and that is to review the application process, take a look at the questions on both the concept paper and the application that you'll be asked to respond to should you decide to apply, and what we're hoping to learn and understand about your organization with these questions. As this is a recorded webinar, I won't be taking questions, obviously, but at the conclusion, I'll share with you some information about places you can go to get some more information about the program and contact information so that if you have questions, you know where to go to get those questions answered. So let's move on and talk a little bit about the changes we've made to the program and why. Like many of your organizations, the Charitable Foundation has a strategic plan that guides our work. Motivating the changes that we've made to the Community Grants program is one of the objectives in our strategic plan that you see here, that nonprofits in New Hampshire are stronger and have greater impact because of foundation grants. When we set that as one of our objectives, we asked ourselves, is our Community Grants program set up to reach this goal? And so we've spent the past 18 months or so taking a good look at the Community Grants program to determine if it was in fact set up to meet this objective. Some of the things we did during this period of strategic analysis included conducting a review of grant-making best practices and a review of the current grant-making literature. We consulted with our peers at other foundations and experts and thought leaders in the field of philanthropy around the country. And probably most importantly, we talked to you. We conducted a survey of New Hampshire nonprofits about the kinds of grants that make the most difference in your work. And thanks to you, we received about 500 responses to that survey. And then we held a focus group in order to dig a little deeper on some of what we learned in the survey. Excuse me. All this inquiry and feedback from you pointed to what we actually knew to be true, that unrestricted multi-year support is the single best vehicle to strengthen nonprofits. Now, we've made unrestricted and multi-year grants for some time, and in response to feedback from you, we've worked to increase that support over time. But the fact is, the majority of our grants in the Community Grants program are project grants and for just 1 year. We knew we could do more, and we wanted to change this. So in response to what we've heard from you and our research and learning from the field, we decided that in 2018, we would begin making all unrestricted grants for our larger grants through the Community Grants program, and we would increase the number of multi-year awards we make. We are super excited about this change that is designed really to give nonprofits the flexibility and the support they need to meet their mission. At the same time, we'll continue to offer access to small grants through our Express Grants program. Those are small project grants of up to $5,000. The deadline for that program has passed for this year, and we won't be discussing Express Grants as part of this presentation, but you can find information about that program on our website. So let's review eligibility for these unrestricted grants. So you see here on the right-hand side of the slide, any tax-exempt 501c3 charitable organization is eligible to apply. Any previous grantees through the Community Grants Program must have filed a progress, interim, or final report on your most recent active grants to be eligible to apply for a new grant. And if you don't have a C3 designation, you may apply through a fiscal agent who does, and information on that is available on the website. On the right-hand side of this slide, you see here the list of entities that are ineligible for an unrestricted grant through the Community Grants Program. That includes municipal, county, or state government entities, public and private schools, religious organizations, unless the services being funded are non-discriminatory, non-sectarian, and benefit the larger community, hospitals, and colleges and universities. In addition, I'll add that also ineligible through the Community Grants Program are any grants to organizations whose work focuses on substance use disorder prevention, treatment, or recovery. We do make grants to those organizations. We have an entire portfolio, and for information on our substance use disorder portfolio, please visit the website or contact staff if you need more information or have questions. So let's look at exactly how the program will be set up, and this slide reviews those details. The Foundation is very committed to supporting nonprofits at all different levels of organizational development to build their capacity and their infrastructure. We heard loud and clear that some of the guidelines we had for our unrestricted operating grants were a barrier to many organizations for this kind of funding, particularly the requirement that applicants have a completed board-approved strategic plan and either an independent audit or independent financial review. We want to make this program as open as possible to all organizations, including smaller or newer organizations who often don't meet these requirements. At the same time, we still want to ensure effective use of charitable resources, and we also want to encourage nonprofit best practices around governance and financial management. As a matter of fact, we recognize our application criteria have been incentive for many staff and board leaders to adopt certain best practices. So to try and meet both those objectives, we've established a set of guidelines that we believe speaks to organizations of different sizes or at different stages of development. The way that this works is that there are two different grant award levels, and how much an organization can apply for depends on the types of documentation related to governance and financial management that can be submitted with the application. Let's first focus on the middle column in this slide. With these new guidelines, organizations that do not have an audit or financial review are now eligible to apply for unrestricted support. There are other documents that may be submitted in lieu of an audit or a review, and those are listed here on the slide. These organizations may apply for a $30,000 multi-year grant, which is $10,000 a year for 3 years. Likewise, organizations that do not have a board-approved strategic plan in place at the time of application are now eligible to apply for unrestricted support. These organizations who apply and are awarded a multi-year grant must certify willingness to complete a strategic plan within the first year of the grant, and they too will be eligible to apply for a $30,000 multi-year grant or $10,000 a year for 3 years. And now focusing on the far right column, much like our old guidelines, organizations that can submit an audit or a financial review and that have a board-approved strategic plan can request a $60,000 multi-year grant, which is $20,000 a year for 3 years. And as you see here in both categories, organizations must be able to certify that all of their board members make financial gifts to the organization. I'd like to focus for a minute on the multi-year component of these grants. Again, we know from talking to thought leaders in our field, peers around the country, and most importantly, talking to nonprofit leaders in New Hampshire, that support that is not only unrestricted, but more continuous in nature is key to building nonprofit strength and capacity. We've made multi-year grants through the Community Grants Program, but admittedly, we've made few. With these changes, we're committed to increasing significantly the number of multi-year grants made through the Community Grants Program. But it's important to understand that this will have, particularly in the first year or two of this new approach, an impact on the number of awards we can make. Let me explain why. Due to the way the IRS regulates foundations, when we make a multi-year grant, we must encumber or set aside the cash for that grant at the time that we make the grant, even though we're paying it out over multiple years. So in any one year, if we are making more multi-year grants, that means we will make fewer grants with our available dollars. Keep in mind those will be larger grants, and we'll still be granting out all our available dollars. However, remember those are multi-year commitments. This graphic attempts to illustrate the ramping up that we expect over time. Each of those blocks on the slide represent the number of grants awarded in any one year. So in year one, we'll make a certain number of grants. The next year, we'll pay out the second year to those awarded in the previous year, and we'll make a new set of multi-year grants to different nonprofits. And so it goes over time, and we expect that by year 3, we will be in a funder-grantee relationship with about the same number of grantees as we are now. We wanted to go over this with you and be as open and transparent as possible with those of you who will be applying to this program. There's no question that in the first year, we will be making fewer grants than we typically make. The application and review process for this program will be the same as the process we currently use and will be familiar to those of you who have applied to our larger community grants program in the past. Your first step will be the submission of a concept paper, which is really just a short summary, or pitch, if you will, about your work. Staff will review the submitted concept papers and invite the most competitive, that is, those most likely to have a strong chance of getting funded, to submit a full application. Once those are submitted, those applications will then be reviewed by one of our 9 grant review committees across the state. Those committees then make funding recommendations to their boards, who make the final funding decisions. So a couple final things related to background and logistics. All concept papers and applications must be submitted through our online grant management system, GrantSource. We will not accept concept papers or applications by email or in hard copy. There are a couple ways to access GrantSource. You can visit our website, nhcf.org. The top picture here on this slide is our website's landing page, and then just click the login button in the upper right corner. It's highlighted here in red. That will bring you to the page in the second photo, the big teal square, where you can click on GrantSource or apply for a grant, and you'll be in. The other way is that you can type the URL that you see at the bottom of the screen into your browser, nhcf.smartsimple.com. Please note there's no www, and this will also take you directly to GrantSource. And this is the GrantSource landing page. You type in your email and your password, and you've logged in. On this page, you also see that there are a couple of options for assistance. You can click on the Forgot Password link if you have forgotten your password, and you can click on the Register Here button if you're new to the system, and you'll be walked through signing in for the first time. Once you're fully logged into GrantSource, you'll be brought to your organization profile. If you're new, you must complete this information and validate your profile. Instructions are there on the page. Even if you're not new and you've used GrantSource before, we encourage you to log in and update your profile. Just a note here about the profile. I can't stress enough the importance of your organization profile for a couple of reasons. First, if you do apply for any grant here at the foundation, the profile makes up part of your application. In your profile, you'll be providing a description of your organization and your mission, uploading a list of your board of directors, your organization budget, and other financial documents. As I said, all of this makes up part of your application and will be looked at by reviewers, so it's very important that it's complete and up to date. And even if you don't plan to apply this year, we still encourage you to log in and complete a profile. GrantSource is our database of information on nonprofits and their work, and it's here that we go when we're looking for information on the sector, and we want you to be included in that. So even if you're not applying, go ahead and log in and complete the profile. So this is all the logistical stuff. Let's move on to talking more about the concept paper and the application itself. As I said, our goal is really contributing to nonprofit strength and impact, so we have revised our unrestricted grant application to try and get at this. The concept paper and the application are designed for you to be able to tell the story of where your nonprofit is in its organizational development now and your vision for where you're going into the future. It includes questions that will highlight the goals and strategies that will be your focus over the grant period and areas within your organization that you feel need strengthening in order to carry out and achieve those goals. These are the 4 areas we are trying to highlight and learn about in your concept paper and application. In fact, it's these 4 areas that guide the review of your concept paper and application, and reviewers think about them as they review your application materials. Let's go over them. First, does the organization operate quality programs that improve the community? Has the organization developed specific and realistic short and long-term strategies for addressing identified organizational needs? Does the organization demonstrate how an unrestricted grant could have a measurable impact on organizational and programmatic capacity and effectiveness? And finally, does the organization have the capacity to manage this grant? When you submit this application, you'll be submitting an application for 3-year multi-year support. As we reviewed earlier, we're committed to increasing the number of multi-year awards we make, but based on the strength of the application and available resources, some awards may be for only 1 year. That decision falls within the discretion of the grant committees and ultimately the board making the final funding recommendation. So let's look more directly at the questions themselves that are designed to get at these 4 areas. And notice these icons here. You'll see them pop up on the slides that follow to link each section of the concept paper or application to one or more of these 4 focus areas. The process begins with the submission of a concept paper. The purpose of the concept paper is to provide you with the opportunity to outline your grant request prior to putting in the time and resources needed to prepare a full proposal. We understand that the brevity of the concept paper can be frustrating, and in response to this, we have increased some of the word limits. But it's still pretty short, and it's intended to be that way. Here on the slide are the actual questions on the concept paper, and with these questions, you can see we're trying to get at your organization's impact, your priority program and organizational goals, and your short and long-term strategies. Once again, I'll bring up your profile and why it's important. The reviewers who look at your concept paper will also look at the things in your profile, your mission, your organization description, your board list, your organization budget, while they review your concept paper. Another note is that if you're applying for the $60,000 grant, you're required to submit your organization's strategic plan and the audit or financial review when you submit your concept paper. If either of these documents is being finalized at the time that the concept paper is being submitted, you may upload a document that states as such, and if you're invited to submit a full application, you will be required to upload the completed plan and/or audit and review by the application deadline. Failure to do so will result in an incomplete application and a decline of your request. This year, GrantSource will be open for you to begin working on your concept paper on June 25th, and all concept papers are due August 2nd. And just a note here about the dates. All of these dates are available on our website. You don't have to worry about scribbling them down. And I also do have a summary slide at the end of the presentation with all the dates in one place. So the concept papers are due by August 2nd, and then by August 31st, the invitations to submit a full application will be issued. If you are invited, your full application is due on September 28th. While the concept papers were reviewed by staff, now the review goes to our volunteer review committees around the state. And once again, not to sound like a broken record, but I want to stress again the importance of your profile being updated. These reviewers are different people than those who reviewed your concept paper, and they will also want to look at your organization description, your board list, your budget. In addition, they'll have access to your concept paper as they review the application. I've been finding it helpful to think about the application itself in 3 major sections. It's not really formally set up this way when you see it, but for me, it's been helpful to think about it this way as I think about our application. In the first part of the application, we're focusing on understanding where your organization is now in its development. In the second section of the application, the questions focus on the future, your goals and strategies, and where you're going, and what success will look like for you at the end of the grant period. And finally, in the third section of the application, the questions focus on information related to your finances. I know this makes it sound like it's a big, long application, but it really isn't, and we continue to work really hard to streamline all of our application materials in all of our programs to make your application experience as easy as possible. So now let's walk through each of these sections. In this first section, there are 3 questions. Here is the first. How do you think about and carry out program planning, implementation, and monitoring? In this section, avoid simply describing your program. Again, that's information we can get from the profile. We know your goal is programs that are the best and most effective way to meet your mission. Instead, focus here on how you use your experience, data, and knowledge, both evidence-based and practice-based, to determine the best approach to developing and implementing your programs. Also, we're interested in knowing how you go about measuring the outcomes and impact of your work. Here's the next question. Describe your organization's approach to financial health and planning. We understand the many challenges you face in ensuring the financial health and sustainability of your work. We'd like to understand how your nonprofit looks at its financial model. Some things to think about here. Do you have a fundraising plan? If so, describe it. If not, what specific financial goals are you working toward for the organization? What is the role of both staff and the board around financial health and sustainability of the program? How does your organization plan for potential changes in the funding landscape? And how do you think about addressing them? The last question in this first section that focuses on your organization and where it is now is this last one. How does your board approach leading and governing the organization? Board leadership is critical to supporting the capacity and infrastructure of a nonprofit. We're not looking for a description of your staff or a description of your board members and a list of your board committees. We want to understand how the board learns, works, and contributes to your mission. So for example, what is the board's role in strategy, in developing policies and procedures, in developing programming, and the evaluation of both themselves and their work and the organization itself? If the first part of the application is where you are, in the second part of the application, we're interested in where you're going. With this question, we're asking you to identify 3 to 5 goals or strategic priorities over the grant period. For organizations with a strategic plan, the information you provide here will come from or should be directly related to the goals and priorities you've set in your strategic plan. For organizations without a strategic plan, you will consider and present your strategic priorities for the grant period. You can present goals or strategic priorities in the areas of administration or operations, in program, or in the area of your organization's financial health. Some examples might include board training, long-range financial planning, developing and implementing a communication strategy, program improvement or expansion, staff development, or evaluation. And I'm going to remind you once again that if you do not have a strategic plan and you receive a multi-year award, by accepting the award, you agree to develop a strategic plan in the first year of your grant. The next question asks you to outline the strategies you'll undertake to address the goals or priorities you just identified in the previous question. Think about the areas of your organization that need to be strengthened to achieve those goals or priorities. What will you specifically do to strengthen these areas over the grant period? And the final question of this section, the where are you going section, is what will success look like at the end of the grant period? Our particular interest here is for you to focus on organizational development and your overall capacity, the kinds of things we just talked about in the previous two sections, and not necessarily a focus on process indicators like the number of kids served, or the number of people trained, or the number of performances held. The third and final section of the application is focused on your organization's finances. In this section, we ask a series of questions to get an understanding of your organization's current financial situation and if and how you're using particular financial tools or strategies to contribute to financial health. So we'll ask if you have an operating reserve, and if so, policies around its use. Do you have an endowment? And again, policies around its use. Do you have a line of credit, and have you used it recently? We'll ask you to upload your past 3 years of organization budget to actuals. And finally, if you're an organization doing an audit or review, we'll remind you that you'll need to complete those annually if the grant is awarded. I want to emphasize that there are no right or wrong answers to these questions. Each organization's situation is unique, and we consider the overall context of your organization. Please don't see this list and feel that you have to run out and develop an operating reserve, establish an endowment, and get a line of credit before you can apply. Indeed, these are all great tools that some organizations use to manage their overall financial sustainability. One or more of these may be appropriate for your organization, but again, you don't have to have these things in place to apply. We just want to know about what you're currently doing in these areas. And that's it. Those are all of the application questions. When we think about the changes we've made to this program, one of the things we are really excited about is that we've also strengthened our own process of looking at the impact of this program. And this is where we link this back to where we started, with one of the objectives in our strategic plan, that nonprofits are stronger and have greater impact because of foundation grants. There are two components to this review of impact, and it's important to note here that we plan to use these tools together as a way to look at the impact of the program as a whole, and not really as a way to assess the successes of any one grant to any one organization. So let's look at the first component, reports. Grant reporting is now integrated right into GrantSource. Once a grant is awarded, you will see the information about your reports at the bottom of your dashboard. This is an example of an organization's dashboard, and you see across the bottom the My Reports section. Included there is the date due for the report and the button that you click that will link you right to your report. This is a great new feature of our recent upgrade of GrantSource. And in addition, your report form will pull the information you submitted in your application right into your report and guide you through the reporting on the information you presented in your application. If you're awarded a multi-year grant, you'll be required to submit an interim report prior to release of the next year's payment. And as always, all grantees must submit final reports at the end of their grant term, and this will also be integrated right into GrantSource. We're always really interested in the content of your grant report. We like to read them, and we have been working to improve our own feedback to you about your work. It's extremely helpful to us to understand how you've used our grant support, and we often share the information in the reports with donors who may have helped support your work. The second component of our own review of this program's impact is the completion of a modified version of an organizational assessment tool at the beginning of your grant period and then again at the end of the multi-year grant period. This is a modified tool. We expect it will not be a heavy lift, and it should be no more than 30 to 40 minutes of time from a member of the board of directors and a member of the lead staff. This organizational assessment tool will help us look at any changes in capacity over time. So as I promised, here's a slide that sort of summarizes all of the deadlines for this year's Community Grants Unrestricted Grants program. So as I said, GrantSource will be open and available to you to work on your concept paper beginning on June 25th. But as you know, you have the questions to the concept paper now, so you can certainly begin working on those questions at any time. All the concept papers are due to be submitted by August 2nd, and then by August 31st, we will have issued all the invitations to those being invited to submit full applications. If you are completing a full application, the deadline for doing so is September 28th, and you'll receive a decision on that application by mid to late December. So on this slide, it says Q&A because this is recorded, obviously we don't have the ability to do Q&A here, but let me just share with you a few places where you can get some information should you have more questions. So first of all, there's tons of information on our website. If you have any questions, I really urge you to start with the website. There's information there that describes the program. There is the link to a frequently asked questions, an FAQs document that is ever evolving. I say that because as we get questions from grant seekers, we add them to the FAQs. And there's also the link to a document that includes all of the questions that we reviewed today on both the concept paper and the application. You also see here the name of Wendy Cahill. My colleague Wendy is just at the ready to answer questions that you might have. She's really great at doing that, and she's also your go-to person if you're having any problems with the GrantSource platform itself, technical problems. So that's Wendy's phone number, her extension, and her email address. But if you don't remember Wendy's name and you just want to ask a question, you can certainly just call our direct number, 225-6641, select option 5, and you will be directed to somebody who can answer your questions. And before we go, there's just one other thing I want to mention. If you're listening to this presentation prior to late summer of 2018, later this year, we're going to be offering another workshop to our nonprofit partners on telling your story. And by that, I don't mean telling your story in a grant application, but how to tell your story in a quick and effective way to donors and others you want to engage in your work. We're still working to sort of finalize the details on all of that, but we'll be bringing in an expert speaker. We'll likely hold these sessions in August or early September, and our goal is to have 2 sessions with either one or both of those sessions being live sessions. So please stay tuned, and we will email out information about that as soon as we have it. So finally, thank you. Thank you for the time you took to listen to this information about our unrestricted grants through the Community Grants program, but mostly thank you for everything that you do all around the state to make New Hampshire a wonderful place for all of us.